Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Telecoms in 2025. Super excited to have everyone here. We try to kick off the year with a bit of a view into what we're looking at here at GSMA Intelligence. And it's always a great experience. It's always a great event because, partly we're looking at a lot of different areas, but partly we're coming at to a very specific lens, right? The lens that we look at through the telecom, the technology space, and what we're hearing and what we're seeing from operators. So always excited to be doing this. Always excited to have so many folks online. I know we've got a great set of attendees today. My name is Peter Jarich. I am the head of GSMA Intelligence, and I'll be doing a bit of an intro here and walking you through some of what we're seeing before handing over to my colleague, Pablo Iacopino. And then at the end, we'll be taking questions. So hopefully, if you've registered, if you're here today, you know why you're here. I shouldn't have to explain too much, but I'd like to remind you all to think about questions, send some questions in. There is a Q&A tab. So you can go over to the tab, use that, get your questions in. You'll see soon that there are some questions pre-populated. Don't worry. It doesn't mean that anyone has beaten you to the punch early on in the webinar. It means that we had some questions come in early on. People asked some questions ahead of time. So we have those in. Right? We've got those and we'll be preloading them. But we're setting aside a good amount of time at the end for questions. So don't worry. Start thinking about those, and we'll try and answer as best we can. As always, if there's any questions that we don't get to, we will make sure that we try and get to those afterwards. So with that said, let's move into the content because we're just talking about right now the intro. So if we can go to the next slide. So hopefully a lot of you know who GSMA Intelligence is, what we do. For those of you who don't know, we are the research and consulting arm of the GSMA. So there's a whole lot of stats here, some explanation about what we are and who we do. But the short story is I have the privilege of leading a team of super curious analysts who want to understand what's going on in the technology and telecom world, but really take those insights, take the data, take the knowledge that we have about the industry and translate that into something for the industry, helping everyone across the ecosystem succeed, really taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of us. Right. So you see some data here, a lot of data that we have on the industry covering everything from operational metrics to what's going on with spectrum, a number of I want to call them diverse sets of research across the course of the year. Main thing though, access to a lot of analysts who are here to talk about what's going on in the industry and really try and put it into context. So I'm going to give you a bit now an idea about some of the topics that we're looking at across the year. Pablo will pick up after that. But with that, let's move on to the first slide. Great. So what you see here are our research themes for the year. Now, first thing you might be thinking is that's a lot, and you are right. It is a lot of different topics, and that's really a function of the fact that looking at the market through the telecoms and technology world, there's a lot going on. If you've tuned into this, you probably know that, right? Either you're in the industry and you're sort of dealing with this on a daily basis and trying to figure out how to make sense of it all, or you're not. You're trying to figure out how to make sense of it all because you're coming in new, and you probably recognize that there's a lot going on. So that's why you see so many different things here. Right now, that's everything from what's taking place with telecom networks, right? We know we're in the 5G era. We know we got there from 4G. We know that's never stopping. We're talking about 6G. What's taking place there, right? AI, probably not the first person to tell you this year, maybe even this day, that AI is the topic of the year, was the topic of last year, continue to probably be the topic next year as well. Digital industries, this is how we're talking about, thinking about what are the different audiences for mobile operators, for the mobile ecosystem, B2B space being a big one, as well as consumer. And that's why we're looking at consumer 5G and digital industries separately. Of course, one of the big value props of 5G has been FWA, but more broadly, a lot of changes going on in the fixed broadband space. A lot of changes in fixed broadband have implications for mobile operators because many of them are integrated operators. So very important for us to understand that. Consumer technology, right? Everything from the services, from the devices they're using. You really don't think about mobile operators without thinking about those technologies. One of those technologies is eSIM. Now you might be thinking, hey, that's bit strange to see a lot of these high-level topic things like AI, things like consumer 5G, consumer technologies, and the eSIM, which is very, very narrow. But for us, it's important to think about that in that narrow focus for a few reasons. One, you know, as much as we know eSIM is a transformational technology, we really have not seen it execute on all its opportunities yet. And so we think it's important to look at why and understand what's next. But two, we do believe 2025 will be a big year. And on top of that, we understand that as much as it's important technology, not a lot of research firms that are always looking at very deeply. Now, whether it's because of the relationship that we have with operators, the relationship we have with the folks that are looking at specifications, a lot of which come from the GSMA, we've got some great insights on it. That's why eSIM is so important to us. Satellites, NTNs, hopefully if you've been looking at the industry, you recognize that satellite broadband, direct-to-device technologies, one of the big topics, something that we've seen take off over the last few years, no pun intended. Big focus for us. We'll be doing summits at MWC, integrated into our research from major reports to economic analyses, talking a bit more about that. These last three I kind of group into sort of a broader, less economic, but more value-driven focus, right? And a big part of what we do is trying to think about what is the impact of mobile, right? What's the impact of it on societies, on businesses? How do we drive it with things like spectrum? But then more broadly, what do we need to think about as an industry to make sure that we're sustainable, we're delivering energy efficiency, but not just sustainability from an energy efficiency standpoint, but from a broader circularity standpoint. So that's the quick overview. Let's dig into a few of these and just spend a few minutes on each of these topics to set the stage and give you guys some time to think about questions that we can talk about afterwards. So let's go to the next slide. Network transformation. So I think for a lot of you who maybe have worked with me in the past, you probably know I come from a background of looking at technologies and looking at network transformation and looking at infrastructure. So this is always very near and dear to my heart, right? And it's a big topic, and I think we can understand why, right? So these are the technologies that are shaping the network, but more important than that, right? These are technologies upon which lots and lots and lots of money is being spent, right? You see the figure here, right? 180 billion in CapEx, right? Now we know that money is being spent on today's networks, but also a lot of different network evolutions, right? So whether that's thinking about move from non-standalone to standalone 5G, looking forward to 5G advanced, looking to the rollout of new technologies like Open RAN, like the integration of AI, we know that what's going on in these networks is a lot of change. And we want to make sure that change is put into context, right? And so this is really a big focus for us. Now, a big part of that includes new things, right? We are here to talk about what those new focus areas are. And those new focus areas include things like network APIs. Obviously, you've seen that from the GSMA. Hopefully, you've seen that from us. I talked about fixed broadband networks. We can't ignore that, right? The reality is all of these things come together, and it's a very, very complicated picture, but that's what we're here for, and that's why the network side of things is so important to us. Without those networks, we don't have the services. Without the services, there really is in many ways no industry. So that's kind of where we begin things with, near and dear to my heart. Let's move on to the next slide. Right, so AI, I mentioned this up front, right? There's no way to think about the trends for the year without thinking about AI, right? It's going to be something that across the course of the year we will be talking about. Big focus for last year, and we know that will be a big focus for next year. Now, how should we be thinking about this, right? This is the question, and really this is the question that we come to for any of these topics. How should we be thinking about it, right? And this starts with, for us, sort of a very basic question of AI at large versus AI in the telco space. Now, we know that in many ways, operators in the past have been sort of criticized for maybe being a little bit slow in terms of what they are doing on AI. And in some cases, that's fair, although we've seen a lot of focus on automation, a lot of focus on AI in their operations. So I was talking a bit about AI, right? And for us, the focus on AI is a combination of how we look at what's taking place for telcos, right? And as much as telcos may have been slow to engage on AI traditionally, they've really gone very quickly to accelerate their adoption of AI in the last few years, particularly around Gen AI. Right? When you see around 3/4 who say they've either commercially deployed or they're testing Gen AI solutions, the message is fairly clear. But the question there is, how do we balance those trends? Right? How do we balance the trends of what's taking place at large, right, in the industry, the trends that are taking place, the innovations that are taking place, the companies, versus how that's getting put into place by telcos? Big focus for us. Of course, you may all remember that last year there was a big focus on what's taking place with AI devices, how it's being integrated into digital services. That obviously continues to evolve. Maybe less focus on devices. If you were at CES last week, you saw there weren't the same types of of AI specific devices as we had in the years past. But the question now, and the question for 2025 is, how do we take those capabilities and integrate them into the things that we're using? Again, digital services, digital devices. How do we integrate to enterprise workflows and the way that consumers are living their lives, consumers are interacting with digital technologies? Again, you see from sort of our work, a third of enterprises say they're undertaking digital transformation that leverages AI. 3/4 of the consumers are aware of Gen AI, and you've got 60% who are users, right? So we know it's taking place. Enterprises, consumers, they're all taking advantage of it. What does that mean to the industry? What does that mean to telcos is the question for us. We can go to the next slide now. Satellite and NTN, right? So I mentioned this before, that it's been a big focus for us. And I can tell you, a few years ago when we began looking at it more deeply, there was a really big question, right? A question internally of how long is this going to be a focus for the industry? And I say that because we've seen this come in waves, right? We've seen the focus on satellite come where there's a lot of interest, a lot of hope, a lot of ideas of what we can do. For the last 20 plus years, I've seen this maybe every decade where we talk about it. So the question is this for real this time, right? Does this have momentum? Is there something that's going to take place that will be different from the past? And the answer is clearly yes, right? So we work with operators, we track the number of operators that are engaging with satellite players. And when you get to 90 plus operators who are partnering with the satellite space, it's real, right? The interest is real, right? And why is the interest real? Well, you're seeing that momentum build, right? Momentum builds extra momentum, right? You see the footprint of coverage of how these satellite constellations, whether it's because the new constellations being built or the partnerships touching more and more of the world, right? But more than that, you're beginning to see the opportunity. As operators get closer to this, they begin to see, well, how can I put this to use, right? What are the number of IoT devices that are addressable by this? If we think about that in terms of an IoT base going forward, and for our work, talking about 2 billion devices, right? How much money could this be delivering for operators? Again, we've done some modeling. You see that here around 30 billion. But the question is, what are those implications, right? What are the implications in terms of addressable market, in terms of revenues? Of course, how does that impacted by technologies and the different solutions out there? And of course, how does this fit into broader societal goals? Things like reaching out to people who don't have access, things like sustainability, things like reliability. How do we make sure that we have reliable networks if something takes place, right? We see this right now. You're looking at this in terms of places like California, right, where networks may be in need and satellite can help support those. I think it's a big focus for us, and we'll see this continue to evolve over the rest of the year. We can go on to the next slide now. Similar to, and saying this, I always feel like I'm dating myself a bit, but similar to the satellite discussion, I think we can think about what's important for driving the network, right? And where we look at technologies and where technologies are very important. Spectrum is one of those. Right. And so not too surprising if you think about a big focus for us here at GSMA Intelligence or the GSMA, spectrum has always been a big focus for us. Now, over the last few years, obviously, the question has been spectrum for 5G. Right? Making available spectrum for 5G, making available spectrum that can support the quick rollout of these networks. Obviously, that's been a big focus of the operator world's been a big focus of the market, and you can see the number of countries where this has been rolled out for our own databases, right? But what's particularly interesting, and I can say this, that as we look at the market and I look at the information that's out there, and that's a big part of what we do, right? We're looking at the information that's out there, what information people have access to, what information they need, what maybe isn't out there, and you see a lot of great information that's similar to what you might see elsewhere, right? The number of markets where 5G spectrum is available, the number of markets where millimeter wave spectrum has been available, and that's great information. I think we provide that, we talk about that. There's a number of other folks that see that. For me, what's particularly interesting going beyond that, though, is a focus on things like how are we looking at the management spectrum? How are we looking at new spectrum models? Right? Because it's not just the fact that spectrum's allocated magically, right? Governments have different requirements for how they assign that. We're looking at innovations in terms of how that's being assigned, right? Different obligations that maybe make it easier or in some cases harder to roll out these networks. How is that evolving? What does that mean for operation? What does that mean for the market? I think that's some of the more exciting stuff that we do. On top of that, a focus on sunsets and technology neutrality. So you see here the number of 2G and 3G networks that we are tracking. They'll be shut down in the 2025 to 2030 timeframe, right? This is based on announced plans. It's based on what we're seeing in the market. By the stuff that we've seen in the market, the announced plans, 2025 looks to be one of the biggest years for sunsets. What does that mean? It means opening up new spectrum for new opportunities, for launching 5G. It means a huge amount of change that we need to understand in the market. We want to take advantage of it. We can go to the next slide. Energy efficiency and circularity. So this is another one, and I'll say similar to satellite, where you've been in the market long enough, you've seen these cycles, right? Where new technology comes around, and when that new technology comes around, there's a big focus in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability, right? And I put it in that order because that's oftentimes the way that it's thought about, right? Energy efficiency first, with sustainability obviously being the broader sort of bigger picture goal. And so we saw this with 5G. And the question then again, in my satellite is it for real this time? How long will it be lasting? How long will we be talking about this? Well, we continue to talk about it for a few reasons, right? One, the message has not gone away. We have not stopped talking about energy efficiency. Yes, as 5G came online, there was a big focus on it. There were energy cost increases, which made it even more important. But that rolled into a large number of operators here who say that this is very important to their goals. It rolled into a number of operators who've committed to being net zero, right? You see those numbers here from our own research, from operator disclosures, right? So it means it isn't going away, right? At the same time, though, why it's particularly important to us is that we've seen the progress on net zero. Operators are making that progress, right? We understand, though, that as much as telecoms does not represent a vast majority of the energy use, right, of energy use across the globe, it's only 1%. That's still a big number, and there's a lot of room for improvement there. But more importantly, I think this is what's very, very interesting, is a couple things that aren't recognized. One, the way this is being linked into broader ESG agendas, right? So recognizing that sustainability is critical to ESG and what operators want to do there. Two, the fact that this is becoming more than just energy efficiency, more than just sustainability of networks and operations, but looking at this in terms of circular economy, right? The way the rest of the industry kind of looks at this, right? And what does that mean for operators and how can they support that? And then last, I think this is the thing that is probably least recognized. It's how we think about sustainability, not just in terms of operators' own operations, but the impact they can have on other industries. It's enablement effect, right? The value of things like 5G, the value of things like digital technologies in enabling other industries to be more sustainable. I think there's a lot going on there. Big focus for us. Excited to be talking about for the rest of the year. So with that, let's go on to the next slide. And I think this is where I hand it over to Pablo.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone. It's great to connect with all of you. I'm Pablo Iacopino, Head of Research at GSMA Intelligence. So one of the most exciting trends that we see in the market is the rise of digital industries. And why is that interesting? Why is that important? Because we all know that there is an acceleration in terms of digital transformation of enterprises across vertical sectors. And this brings B2B business opportunities for a full range of suppliers of digital transformation technologies, including operators. So when we think about the rise of digital industries, we need to think about the B2B opportunity and how do we capture that as an industry. Now, understanding enterprise behavior is key. That's why in August 2024, we conducted a big enterprise survey covering more than 4,000 enterprises across 10 vertical sectors and 21 countries. And really, the objective was to understand the progress with enterprise digital transformation, objectives, why are enterprises transforming, what is that they need, what are the key priorities, how much are they going to spend on digital transformation, and how they will inform supplier decisions. And one of the important insights from the survey was the 10% data point. Enterprises will spend 10% of their revenues on digital transformation between 2024 and 2030. Now, 10% is a big number, and it means that there are opportunities for suppliers to capture a piece of this 10%. So B2B is a big focus for our research, and in 2025, we will continue to do research across a number of areas, understanding developments in all the digital transformation technologies, from cloud to edge to artificial intelligence, as Peter said, the evolving landscape for security, IoT, and importantly, how competition and partnership dynamics are evolving. Now, 5G and private networks is a big focus of our research. So we all know that there is an expectation that 5G will help digital transformation. And what does it mean for the industry? What does it mean for operators? Same for private networks. There is growing momentum. What is that we expect in 2025 in terms of new suppliers entering the market, potentially consolidation, potentially some suppliers scaling down in terms of expectations, and importantly, the vertical sectors that will drive future growth in private networks. And from our survey, there are some unexpected findings. For example, media and entertainment is expected to see a big number of private network deployments. So B2B really offers opportunities for a range of suppliers, and an important focus of our research is operators. How are operators evolving their B2B strategies? What is that they are doing to capture the opportunity? And when I say what is that they are doing, I'm not only talking about the capabilities, the technologies, and the services that they provide, but also changes in the organizational structure, M&A, partnerships, and also change in the culture, cultural changes that are fit for purpose to capture the B2B opportunity. And there is an important data point that you see here, 400 billion. We have done some research, and we estimated that the addressable market for operators in B2B technology and services beyond connectivity is 400 billion. Last but not least, IoT. IoT has been a big focus for GSMA and GSMA Intelligence for a number of years, and it will continue to be a big focus. Recently, we updated our IoT forecast, and we expect that by the end of 2025, there will be 26 billion IoT connections globally. And this includes cellular and non-cellular technologies. And really, what drives growth is enterprise IoT. the split of the 26 billion between consumer and enterprises will be 46% consumer, 54% enterprises. And this 54% will continue to grow in the future. So really new research on IoT in terms of operator strategies, supplier strategies, and importantly, the impact of new technologies. RedCap, that is moving from trials to commercial availability, passive IoT, eSIM, integrated SIM, and I will elaborate on that, and then satellite, integration of satellite and cellular connectivity. So a lot to cover within digital industries, and this will make our work and our insights useful for our customers. Next slide, please. Consumer 5G. So obviously there is a big focus on B2B in the industry as a growth opportunity, but let's not forget that when we look at the operator revenue mix, 70% of revenue comes from consumer. So consumers and enterprise are equally important. B2B is the driver of growth. Consumer is the driver of cash flow. So by now, we all know that the 5G adoption has been very fast. The industry reached an important milestone in 2024, 2 billion 5G mobile connections. And we all know that when we compare the speed of adoption of 5G versus 4G and 3G, 5G adoption has been faster than any previous network technologies. So in 2025, our focus will be on the next wave of adoption. We forecast 2.6 billion mobile connections, 5G mobile connections, by the end of 2025. And this means a penetration of 29% of total mobile connections. So really the focus is on how do we go from 2 billion to 2.6 billion? What will be the markets and the regions driving the next wave of 5G network launches? Another important aspect is what makes a 5G consumer different from a 4G consumer. And to do that, every year we conduct a consumer survey across major countries around the world, especially countries with fast 5G adoption. And we track the 5G user behavior. How is the behavior evolving? And there is an important data point here from our survey. Consumers who intend to upgrade to 5G are willing to pay 5% extra compared to what they pay for the current 4G subscription. Now, 5G is a big number and offers opportunities for operators to monetize it. Another important insight that we see from our survey is that 5G users are more satisfied with 5G. On average, 82% of 5G users say that 5G has met or exceeded their expectations. And this is an increase compared to the previous consumer survey. And it's a function of growing availability of 5G in terms of network coverage, but also the fact that a growing number of operators are deploying 5G standalone, which offers a better network performance compared to 5G non-standalone. An important part of our research will be how operators are monetizing 5G. And there are some important trends in the market that we see. The first one is the shift to speed-based tariffs. So in the past, most operators used to commercialize 5G tariffs based on data allowances. Consumers pay based on the data that they use. There is a shift to speed-based, where tariffs are designed based on the speed that the consumers get. And this is not new in the industry because the fixed broadband market has always been based on speed-based tariffs. Another important trend that we see in the market is the rise of this new concept of experience-based monetization, where operators provide new consumer propositions that are based on the experience that the customers will get. And this is important because it allows a greater link between fast broadband connectivity delivered by 5G and digital services, gaming, video streaming, metaverse, immersive reality. And this is important because with all the new technologies, really the monetization opportunity comes from the integration of connectivity with the devices and services. That's why we will keep focusing on evolution of 5G devices in terms of new availability of devices, the price of 5G devices, innovation across smartphones, 5G fixed wireless, and other consumer devices. Last but not least, when we think about 5G, it's important also to track the new services that 5G is delivering and how 5G is making these services more immersive for end users. And one of the emerging services is 5G new calling. At the moment, the service is mostly available in China. So how will 5G new calling scale beyond China will be a big focus of our research. Next slide, please. Now, we have been talking about mobile technology. One important area of our research is fixed broadband. What we see in the market is that there are new trends shaping the future of fixed broadband. One is the shift from legacy technologies, DSL, to fiber, a shift that is accelerating. As you can see from this slide, we expect that by the end of 2025, fiber share of total fixed broadband connections will be 76%, and it will continue to grow in the future. So there is a shift from DSL to fiber, but also the arrival of 5G fixed wireless that is disrupting the market. We all know that US is a benchmark for 5G fixed wireless with the highest adoption so far of any markets. We track how many operators, how many markets have launched 5G fixed wireless. It's more than 100 operators already. And this number keeps growing because operators recognize that 5G fixed wireless is an incremental opportunity to monetize 5G in addition to the consumer area and the B2B area. So 5G fixed wireless is a big focus for us. And this means a number of things: tracking deployments, tracking progress in terms of CPE availability and innovation, market segmentation, and also how governments are leveraging 5G fixed wireless for digital inclusion initiatives. And also the arrival of RedCap. RedCap is not only a technology for IoT, but also for 5G fixed wireless, and we see some good momentum in a number of countries. Now, related to fixed broadband, there is an important trend and area of focus that is fixed mobile convergence. We see new important trends happening in the market. First of all, shifting in consumer behavior. Consumers are keen to go beyond the traditional quad play, and some operators are already providing new services, for example, in the context of a smart home, security. So they are augmenting the traditional quad play package with new services, and also the integration of traditional connectivity with digital services, especially around digital entertainment, gaming, and video are now important components of the future of bundles. Now, last but not least, the 5G fixed wireless opportunity. We forecast that 7 countries will have a 5G fixed wireless share of total fixed broadband connections greater than 15% by 2030. This includes the US, but also some of the European countries and also countries in Asia Pacific. So 5G fixed wireless is gaining momentum. There is a lot to cover, and this will continue to be the focus on our research. I also want to add that typically, when we think about 5G fixed wireless, we think about consumer, we think about households. The reality is that 5G fixed wireless is emerging as a viable proposition also for enterprises. And the US is a good example of this trend. Some enterprises, especially small, medium enterprises, don't have fiber availability, so they are looking at 5G fixed wireless as a way to connect their businesses. Next slide, please. Consumer technology. Now, Peter attended the CES in Vegas and shared a lot of insights about how consumer technology is evolving. And speaking of that, tomorrow we will release a couple of articles, a couple of reports related to the key takeaways from CES. So there is a lot of innovation happening in consumer technology. And it's not only about connectivity with the arrival of 5G, but also devices and services. When we think about the devices, it's important to track the evolution and impact of new technologies, artificial intelligence, foldables that are gaining momentum, immersive reality devices, the integration of eSIM and satellite in devices, new innovation in wearables and smart homes. Now, consumer devices are evolving, but really the incremental value story for devices comes from digital services, because this is what consumers want to see. This is how consumers are using devices to consume a range of digital entertainment services. That's why a big focus of our research is developments in gaming, pay TV, fintech, and other digital services. Now, in order to understand really the opportunity coming from the evolution of consumer technology, understanding consumer behavior is key. That's why every year we conduct a consumer survey across major countries to really track the evolution of consumer behavior. What is that drives consumer decisions when they buy a new smartphone? Where are consumers going to buy their next devices? And it's interesting to see that despite the acceleration of online engagement and online sales channels, still a majority of consumers say that they will go to a store to buy their next phone. So it's really a balance between the traditional sales channels in store and the online digital platforms. The other things that we do in our consumer survey, we track brand loyalty, and this means brand loyalty to OEM smartphone brands, but also operators. It's interesting to see that in general, brand loyalty is very high. For example, brand loyalty to OEM smartphone brands is 78%. 78% of smartphone users say that they will replace their smartphone with the same brand. So obviously this offers opportunity for customer loyalty, but at the same time, the other 22% are open to change their smartphone brand. And this brings opportunity for innovation and for OEMs who want to capture incremental market share. Now, pay TV is a big focus. What we see is that obviously cord cutting is accelerating, not only in the US, and in order to compensate for cord cutting, operators are looking at new ways to evolve pay TV consumer propositions, including faster speeds, but also providing OTT video streaming services. So operator strategies for digital services and pay TV are evolving, and including also the rise of digital brands and consumer propositions that really are focused on digital first or digital only propositions. So a lot to cover within consumer technologies, and this makes this theme very, very exciting. Next slide, please. Now, Peter mentioned eSIM as a growing trend. So what we have seen over the last couple of years is really good momentum and progress in terms of availability of devices with eSIM technology, operators launching the service commercially. There are more than 400 operators that offer commercial eSIM service for smartphones. New use cases are emerging, especially around international roaming, the rise of what we call travel eSIM, and also the launch of new consumer propositions. But at the same time, it's fair to say that operators are launching eSIM service, but they are not talking too much about eSIM to their customers. We expect that things will change in 2025, especially in the context of operators leveraging eSIM for the onboarding of new customers, but also operators leveraging eSIM for new consumer propositions, such as digital brands and digital-only consumer propositions. Now, we will continue to do research on eSIM across different areas. One is new developments, new availabilities of eSIM technologies, progress on eSIM specifications, but also tracking consumer behavior. Awareness of eSIM is growing. Consumers are interested in using eSIM, and especially in the context of international roaming. This is important because if consumers use eSIM for international roaming, they are more likely then to use eSIM for domestic mobile services. And when we think about adoption of eSIM, we are still in the early stages. The US is the only market where eSIM penetration is high, nearly 30%, because of the launch of eSIM-only iPhones by Apple in 2022. Beyond the US, penetration of eSIM is still low. However, we expect an acceleration over the next few years, and we expect that the number of eSIM smartphone connections will grow 70% in 2025. Now, when we think about eSIM, there are two big areas: consumer eSIM, but also eSIM for IoT. And this is also an area where we see growing momentum, especially after the release of new specifications for eSIM. So really here, the objective is to scale eSIM beyond automotive. eSIM is already mainstream in automotive. Beyond automotive, there are single initiatives rather than sector-wide deployments. So really a big focus will be how do we scale eSIM in IoT, and how can eSIM brings innovation to IoT. Next slide, please. Last but not least, mobile impact. And this is horizontal across all the themes that we track. For 3 decades, mobile technology has been central to delivering a digital economy, digital inclusion, and this will continue to be the case. Mobile technologies contribute to more than 5% to GDP, and this contribution will continue to grow. So our research will continue to focus on how mobile will deliver impact for socioeconomic developments, whether it is SDGs or whether it is closing the usage gap, and more importantly, the internet usage gap, because there are still many people who have the possibility to connect to the internet, but they don't use it much. And importantly, the role of 5G for digital transformation. And this includes also looking at changes in policy and regulation that are fit for purpose to drive mobile impact, and also the assessment of the investment that is needed to bridge mobile coverage and usage gaps, areas of market reform that can help unlock investments and improve affordability of mobile services. So a lot to cover also in here. Next slide, please. Okay, so overall 11 themes, and we will deliver these themes throughout the year in terms of reports, webinars, presentations, discussions with clients. And if you want to have access to the full details, we have different areas that can allow you to have access. And with that, we can now stop sharing the screen and we will be ready for Q&A.
Thanks, Pablo, and thanks to everyone who is still here. 11 themes. It was a lot, so thank you very much. I still see we've got a great audience, and now's the time for Q&A. So I personally think this is the best time. This is the best part. You know, I mentioned this before. We had some questions come in early. So Pablo, I'm going to kick off with a question that hopefully we can also sort of figure out a way to read in some of the other questions that we have. But for you, of all the trends, which do you think is most important, right? There's 11 different themes there. That's a lot. What do you think? What are you looking at as being the most transformative or maybe the most exciting, but the most important one this next year?
I think artificial intelligence, and I think this is a comment that you made at the beginning of the webinar, for a very simple reason. AI technology is horizontal. There are implications for devices, services, connectivity, networks, but also implications for how digital transformation of enterprises will accelerate. So I think AI, being an horizontal theme, is probably the most exciting trend that we see in 2025.
No, I agree that, and I think you make a really good point, because the second question that we had that came in beforehand was a question of, you know, many of these trends may have technologies in common and a bunch of, you know, cross-cutting or horizontal technologies. So I think you're right, and it's worth noting that, you know, as much as we call AI as a theme, that's a theme that's going to be essentially seen across all those different areas, right? Whether it's the use of spectrum, whether it was the use, you know, network transformation, whether it's consumer 5G, you know, across most of those, right? You're going to see some sort of role for AI. I will say for me, I think, you know, the most interesting part of AI that we'll hopefully see this year is a sort of focus on how we're thinking about building networks to support AI, as opposed to just how AI can support networks. But you know, time will tell. I think the other thing, and just sort of answering this question then myself in terms of cross-cutting technologies, this, you know, I think the other cross-cutting technology that's important to note, because we didn't talk about it much, security, right? A focus on security. And it's technology, it's a trend, call it what you will. And there's a lot of questions that I saw came in sort of asking about how are we going to be protecting consumers? How are we going to be protecting end users from things like phishing, smishing, fraud, scams? How do we think about network transformation and the roles on security? And I'll add a few things there, right? One, from the research that we do on the network transformation side of things, we see that security is super important to operators, right? One of the top most important priorities for operators, end user security, network security, right? Focused on both of those. Enterprise, and Pablo can attest to this, right? From the work that we do on enterprise, the work that we do in terms of talking to enterprises or talking to operators in terms of enterprise use. Security, huge opportunity for operators, right? Helping enterprises with their securities, but at the same time, right? Huge opportunity for, you know, enterprises as they think about their own networks. And last, I think this is an interesting thing, the network side of things. Right, great question. In terms of how, as we evolve networks, there are, you know, opportunities, but also challenges in terms of security. Great point. We see that, and you would have seen, if you're a subscriber, you would have seen we did some work earlier on in the year in terms of challenges and concerns around Open RAN. You know, security is always one of those. We're talking about new technology. We're talking about open technologies. So I think you're seeing that play out in terms of how operators are concerned. But linking back to the other question from before and Pablo's point around AI, I think what we're going to see is also not just, and I think the way that we're looking at AI in terms of security sort of landscape is sort of a, you know, everyone talks about a double-edged sword. I'm sure there's triple-edged swords out there. I don't know how that would work. But you know, really, there's sort of a three-dimensional angle to security and AI. One is this idea of AI being a threat. You can generate a lot more security. It's a lot easier to generate fraud generate threats with AI. At the same time, AI is being used as a tool to guard against those. But then at a more fundamental layer, as operators build out new AI capabilities, then we need to be thinking about how you secure those capabilities as well, right? If you've got a lot of data, and we know that AI is ever hungry for data, it is a data fuels AI. How do you secure that? How do you secure all your AI infrastructure is going to be critical for the industry. So let's look at some of the other questions that we have here. There's one here maybe we can end with about MWC 25. Pablo, I guess there's a question around private 5G networks, rural connectivity, mission critical communications. How do those all fit in? I know that you mentioned some of the private network side of things. How do you see that all fitting into some of our coverage?
Yes, obviously, private networks are momentum is accelerating for private networks, and what we see is that really a diverse range of use cases, including rural connectivity. So this is an area where we do a lot of research, speaking with operators, suppliers of private networks, but also really understanding what is that enterprises expect from private networks in terms of benefits, because obviously we all know that the private networks will come with a cost for end user enterprises. So it's important that as an industry, we make sure that enterprises are aware of the benefits that private networks can deliver. So mission critical is obviously an important aspect, and we see some innovation and some developments, especially in the US, which is a leading market for private networks. So all of these are really, really relevant and will continue to drive momentum for private networks.
That's really helpful. Maybe follow on from some of what you were talking about before. You talked about before in terms of IoT, and you talked about RedCap availability. But there's a question here about RedCap and impacting FWA. I know there's a lot of discussion out there about how if RedCap can bring down the price of 5G, then it makes FWA more affordable. Is that the right way to look at it? And are we seeing anything there?
Exactly. So, as I said, RedCap has a number of use cases. One is IoT, one is fixed wireless. And what we see is that really a big focus from vendors to deploy CPE with the RedCap technology that can reduce the cost of the equipment for end users. So there is already progress across a number of countries. And the important thing is that 5G RedCap is a new technology. So we're still learning, the industry is still learning in terms of how to use it and how to implement it. And I expect to see growing momentum in 2025. And in my opinion, fixed wireless will be an important driver of adoption of RedCap because especially in markets where fixed wireless will see momentum, and especially in markets where fixed wireless is an important alternative because fixed broadband infrastructure is very limited.
Great, that's a good answer. Question here around comments from existing 3G, 4G operators regarding decision to migrate to 5G or wait for 6G. I think we put it in that term. It's a great question, right? And I think you always get to this point of sort of what comes next and how much do you wait. And I think we know that we're sort of halfway through this decade, and there's an expectation that 6G is coming towards the end. We didn't include 6G as one of the trends in part because it fits into things like network transformation, but in part because we want to make sure that as an industry, again, part of our goal is to help the industry execute on the opportunities, that we focus on the opportunities that are in front of them right now, and that includes 5G. So I can't say that we're hearing a lot of it, and I know there's a number of allocations coming up for spectrum. We don't hear a lot of focus on saying, let's wait for 6G, but rather, how do we think about maybe going directly to SA, going directly to 5G advanced? I've had some conversations with operators who plan to be getting 5G spectrum this year, thinking about going straight to 5G advanced. So it's less about 6G, but more about taking advantage of the way that 5G's evolved. And I think that's the right way for the industry to be looking at it versus waiting. We only have a couple minutes left here, so I think there's one last question that I want to get to. And Pablo, it's a question of, okay, and this was one of those that came in early, and apologies to those of you who sent in your questions. We haven't had a chance to get to them. Trust that we will get back to you afterwards. Responses. Know also that the slides will be available, that you can also reach out to all of us. So with that aside, let's just use the last few minutes. Pablo, big question. How do you expect to see this reflected at MWC 25? What's going to be the big focus for MWC 25? What do you think? And then I'll give my quick thoughts.
Okay, so obviously, when we think about the trends, the themes, and the areas of focus, we also think about the topics that will drive Mobile World Congress. So there is a broad alignment between GSMA Intelligence and the themes that will be covered at Mobile World Congress. And I think artificial intelligence, definitely a big theme for Mobile World Congress, and we will be supporting the delivery of content throughout the event. So AI, B2B, big focus on B2B, and also the augmented 5G connectivity with deployments of standalone, arrival of 5G advanced. So the next phase of fast broadband mobile connectivity.
No, I think that's all fair. I would just add a few things. Right, one, we didn't see a lot of 5G advanced last year. We expected to see more. 100% right, Pablo. Expect to see more this year. AI, obviously, but I'd add a few things. One, if you're really interested in what's going to be taking place at MWC and the big themes, please tune back. We will be doing next month a webinar focused specifically on what we expect operators are going to want to hear about from MWC and at MWC 25. Last year, Pablo helped us kick off the first time where, beyond looking at the big trends, and I'd say that there's no shortage of trends pieces out there. What was the message from MWC? But by looking at and working with the operators that were there, this is the first time I've seen from any research firm an actual categorical look at what the operators were talking about, what their messages were, what they were talking about, what was important to them. We're lucky enough by having that relationship with those operators, having the relationship with the GSMA to be able to do that. Tune in next month with a webinar where we think operators are going to be hearing about. And then if you are at MWC, please ring us. We'd love to meet there. If you're going to be there through the end of the show, Thursday we do our analyst wrap up. Thursday, we talk to analysts, not just from GSM Intelligence, but across the industry about what took place at MWC. It's a great event if you're there on Thursday, but please reach out. And more than anything, thank you very much. If you're a customer, thank you doubly. If you're not, and any of this was interesting, please reach out. We'd love to talk to you more. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo.
Thank you. Bye.